Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's industry and campus webinar, Big Green, Big Impact, How Dartmouth Reinvented the College Homepage. This is Jamie Farrell, Online Event Production Manager at EDUCAUSE, and I'll be your moderator for today. EDUCAUSE is pleased to welcome today's speakers, Justin Anderson, Vice President for Communications at Dartmouth College, Lynn Capozzi, Chief Marketing Officer at Acquia, and Justin Emond, CEO at Third and Grove. They'll introduce themselves in just a moment, but first let me give a brief orientation on our session's learning environment. We hope you'll join us in making the session interactive. To open up the chat, click on the chat icon at the bottom of the presentation window, and you can use the chat to make comments, share resources, or pose questions to our presenters. Be sure to select everyone from that chat drop-down menu to engage with all of your fellow attendees. And we encourage you to type your questions into the chat throughout the webinar, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Now, if you have any technical issues, please direct a private message by selecting panelists in the chat dropdown. The session recording and slides will be archived later today on the EDUCAUSE website. And now let's turn to today's presentation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Lynn Capozzi from Acquia. I'm going to take a minute and ask both Justins to introduce themselves, say what organization they're from and what they do. So let's start with Justin Emond.
Thanks, Lynn. Hey, everyone. I'm Justin Emond. I'm the CEO and founder of Third and Grove. We work with clients in the higher education space and nonprofit space on digital transformation, redesign, and really getting more of a return on their website investment. Normally based in Boston. I'm in Lower Manhattan today. It's great, even with the mask mandates pretty much gone. Just bring your vaccine card to get into any restaurant. Thanks, Lynn.
Awesome. Justin.
Thanks, Lynn. Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Anderson. I am Dartmouth's Vice President for Communications, a role in which I've served for about 5 or 6 years now. And I'm currently in my office in Hanover, New Hampshire. I'm one of the few people in the office, but I'm here, and it's actually a beautiful day up here today.
Excellent. Well, thank you both Justins. Thank you. Let's talk about the agenda for today. What we're going to talk about, I think, is a really pretty exciting story. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about kind of the story of Dartmouth. So I think we all know Dartmouth is just a wonderful, wonderful brand. And we're going to talk about how Dartmouth was redesigned and how they redesigned and redid their website. So let me just take a minute to talk about kind of who all the players are. So I'm from Acquia. Acquia is the software company and produces the software to create the websites, to update websites and make that happen. Justin E., who I'll affectionately call Justin E. from this point forward. Justin E.'s organization, Third and Grove, is one of our wonderful partners, and it's the partner that made this happen. And so you'll hear Justin Anderson talk about how closely Dartmouth worked with Justin's Third and Grove organization and how they were kind of the brains behind and the muscle behind making all of it happen in terms of relaunching. And then Justin A. will talk from his own experiences about being at Dartmouth. So our agenda will include, talking about why it's even important to keep your website up to date, which I think we all know, but I'll take a minute just to talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about the story of how Dartmouth began and in their whole experience around their web property. The approach that was taken. So what was the approach? What did you start with? Justin will kind of walk through what happened with that and what the approach was for the redesign and for the relaunching of their site. What were the considerations? So when we went through this process, what did we think about? What did the team look at? What process did they use to go through this? How did they measure objectives? How do they know it was going to be successful? All kinds of considerations. And I'll talk a little bit about also how Dartmouth used a digital asset management product to help make their process and their experience even better, and how it helps them in their branding efforts. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then some results and some learnings, hopefully learnings that we'll be able to pass along to you in case, for instance, you're going through a similar process. So let's talk a little bit about, if you go to the next slide, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about your website. Now, I think in the world of what's happened in the past 18 or so months, there's probably not a more important branding opportunity for your organization than kind of what's happening with your website, where everyone has gone digital. Everyone is researching. Everyone is researching schools. Everyone is researching so much information. So, although some may think it's table stakes, their website is really still, I think, the heart of your digital presence. And it's so important. I always like to call it the 24/7, 365 lead gen machine, because it works for you at all points in time, for which it should. So it is definitely the largest kind of, think about it as the largest portion, I think, of your brand. And it's the best way to develop this great customer and great, student experience, and having that website be a fabulous entry. To be your front door is always kind of the way I like to think about it. So, and who knows more about a wonderful brand and developing a wonderful team and developing a great educational experience than the folks at Dartmouth. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Justin Anderson, so you can kind of talk through, Justin, how it all began and what you folks were facing at Dartmouth.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for that great introduction. Good morning again, or good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate you joining us today. I'm going to take just a couple of moments to walk through how this process began for us. And I think I know, as you all know, that Dartmouth it's a place. It's a real place made with bricks, mortar, and New Hampshire granite. Nestled in the North Woods of northern New England, we take great pride in our rural location, which we think really differentiates us. Yet, despite the importance of place and our location and that land, our most valuable resource, digital or otherwise, is probably our website. As Lynn said, it's how we introduce ourselves to the world. It creates the first impression for a future Rhodes Scholar deciding where to apply, or a future Nobel Prize winner determining where to teach and do research. Just because we are a 250-year-old institution, that doesn't mean that our website should look centuries old. Justin, if you could advance. So to be fair, our website was not 250 years old. It was only 8 years old when we got started on the redesign, but it was launched in 2012, and that's sort of light years when it comes to web design and redesign. Back in 2012, as you may remember, the Hunger Games premiered. Usain Bolt dominated and dabbed his way through the Summer Olympics in London, and the stock market was surging at 13,000. So a lot has happened since then. Not least of all, every single one of our Ivy League and Ivy Plus competitors redesigned its website. So we knew that we really had some catching up to do, particularly if we wanted to not just catch up, but to try to be a leader. And that's where Justin E. and the folks at Third and Grove came into play. So, as I said, it was 2012, and this is what our website looked like from 2012 until our launch this summer. It was long past its sell-by date, as far as we were concerned, and even more so during the pandemic, which, as Lynn described at the beginning, really underscored the importance and the value of a robust digital presence. It was not the time when you wanted to be relying on something that was rolled out almost a decade ago. But this site, it served us well. It was a workhorse. And in fact, from 2019 until 2020, our monthly unique page views went from 150,000 to 250,000, and the average time spent on the page went from 1:16 to 3:30, so it nearly tripled. But it's these next two data points that I'm going to share that really proved crucial to the redesign. Number one, for the several years leading up to the redesign in 2020, 30% of our traffic was internal and 70% was external. The second data point is the three most popular sites on the home site were admissions, departments and programs, and degree finder. So clearly, this is prospective students who and external audience who is coming to this site. So 70% external. And this told us that we really couldn't afford to be sort of a bulletin board for the campus community and really had to lean into the marketing potential of the website as Lynn described in the beginning. And we can talk more about this as we go, but that posed some challenges with stakeholders, all of whom think that the website is for them. And so we had to use the data that we gleaned to sort of explain why we were making such an external facing site, which was a bit of a change. So it was that data and that notion and that provided really sort of our North Star as we went through this process. And it really guided our decision making in collaboration with Justin E. and his team from Third and Grove. And so with that, Justin, I will hand it off to you.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate that. You know, the Dartmouth lead is one of those really exciting opportunities when it comes into the inbox that, that there was an RFP to compete for. And it was really unique because it's a mixture of two emotions. It's really exciting and thrilling. Dartmouth is an iconic institution and everyone knows it. It's very, very high profile. And it's really, really terrifying because it's the project you can't screw up because it's so high profile. So it's nerve-wracking and exciting all at the same time. But it was really, really fun to work with. It was also our initial conversations were right when the pandemic started. And so it was a very unique time. We had never really done such a big pitch before fully over Zoom because we couldn't be in person. We actually haven't been able to actually meet throughout the entire project because of the pandemic. So it was a very, very unique situation, but really, really fun and a huge opportunity for us to work together. So I want to talk a little bit about the approach that we took for the redesign and kind of the big umbrella word digital strategy and what that actually looks like when you're trying to reimagine a website. So you do a bunch of things. The first thing that you do is you talk to a bunch of people. You have a lot of conversations, and these are the stakeholders that Justin Anderson alluded to, and sort of balancing those. Making those people feel heard, making sure that they understand that they're part of the process. But if you try to please every stakeholder in a web design project, it will fail and it will be a really bad website and it will serve no one's interest if you try to serve everyone's interest. But the first important step there to balancing that is talking to a lot of people and really trying to get a good understanding about some of the challenges and opportunities that are there. So we heard lots of things in that process. I'm highlighting a few of them here, but we definitely heard things about, the user experience, the information. A lot of it did revolve around that there was great info there, but it was either hard to find, hard to digest, sort of hard to share. So first thing, talk to a bunch of people. Second thing that we do is we look at a bunch of data. And this mostly is analytics, but there's multiple sources of data you can pull on, but we'll lean heavily on analytics. We'll look pretty comprehensively, and we're looking for trends and things that are interesting. So we don't care about the number of page views. We care about other indicators that might give us some information about things that aren't working, things that are working, aren't working, and possibilities. So a couple of interesting things that we found: great organic search presence, which was really a strong position to be in. Search wasn't engaged with too heavily, but when people were searching, it was a very tactical, specific need. I'm going to the homepage because I got to get course information as a student, or I need to get information on sort of the prereqs for my major, or Kronos, which is a software actually for timekeeping. So it's employees just getting to a login portal, right? So looking at the search terms was very illustrative in terms of some of that tactical interaction they had with the site. But what was jumped out at us most in the data portion is that on the news section of the Dartmouth site, half of the users left after the page they landed on. And this was a big, put a big spotlight on an opportunity. People go to Dartmouth to change the world, but that story wasn't coming through to visitors, right? And that excitement wasn't captivating after that first piece of content. So that was a big sort of finding for us in the data that we wanted to focus on later, and it went into some of the later part of the project. Next thing that we do in a strategy exercise is look at what's working, right? What can we learn? There are lots of good things to learn from an existing, from a client's existing website. So what can we glean? What does that inform about the whole process? We learned a lot from what was working on the existing site, featuring information, pointed, focused, small tidbits, but really valuable bits of information were well communicated, well engaged with visitors on the site, worked really well from that perspective. And that really helps sort of the virtual visit side of Dartmouth. So just give me a feel without having to be there in terms of what the campus is like, how many students, what is it sort of feel from sort of a quantitative perspective. So all those pieces were working well, and that was a helpful input. We also want to look at what isn't working well, sort of to get the other examples. I talked a little bit about the storytelling piece, or the fact that people were hitting news and weren't engaging with more content on the site. So that was certainly a learning in terms of what could be working better. Some of the data and some of the people we talked to, the content organization, things around navigation, those all were clear that those were opportunities for improvement in sort of the new site experience. So learned a great deal from what was working really well, and also what wasn't working. And here's a good example. So this is the navigation sort of plan from the old nav to the new nav. And all the markup here, all the proposed changes in terms of where things might move, what things might be taken out of the navigation. Nav is always a very political place for a redesign, and everybody has strong opinions because everybody wants to be in the navigation. They want to be at the top. Data can help here. So leaning on what you found and what that informs about the navigation is key. Two, using and leveraging that data can focus the conversation not on sort of opinions, but on the data. There's a great quote by the old CEO of Netscape. He said, if we have data, we're going with that. If all we have are opinions, we're going with mine. And there's always so many opinions in navigation, right? So like use the data, focus on it, and sort of, use that in the conversation. So that really helps. And then also just keep in mind, one of the cardinal rules of navigation is if you give people less doors to go through at the end of a hallway, you will drive more people through the doors that you want, right? And if there are 2 doors at the end of a hallway instead of 10, you're going to just get more people down lanes that you're looking for. So it's always a tricky, hot button topic to go through, but really important to look at and really study and push hard on. Okay, so we talked about sort of information gathering and talking to people and looking at what's working and what isn't. Now it comes for kind of the fuzzy hand-wavy part of digital strategy. And to explain that, I want to tell you about my 90-year-old Italian grandma. So my 90-year-old Italian grandma is a really buttoned up lady, and she's, pretty conservative and, pretty straight-laced. But the second she steps onto the floor of a casino, she lights up like a firework. And I have never seen her move more quickly than on the floor of a casino. And she just runs around. It was hard for me to keep up with her being so many years younger than her, but it was amazing to see. And we would go from sort of slot machine to slot machine. She'd look around, she'd keep walking around, and then she'd find one and she'd go right towards it. And I said, Grandma, how do you know which slot machine to go to? They all look the same. And she goes, oh, honey, they're not the same. You have to wait until one speaks to you, and then you know. And so that is a really good way to think about digital strategy, because it's sort of the most crucial phase of it, which is you have a bunch of data, you've talked to a bunch of people, you have all these inputs, you have all this information, you have all these opinions. But then you've got to really let all of that kind of marinate in your head, get your arms around it all, and wait for something to really have sort of a gravity of its own and pull you towards. And it's really that fuzzy, but that's kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for that slot machine that speaks to you. You're looking for kind of that North Star that once you kind of realize and go towards, everything else, all the other considerations and goals and things start to click under it. So for Dartmouth, when that process happened, we were all immediately reminded of this great quote by Seth Godin. That's a Tesla. That's a picture of a Tesla. And the quote by Seth Godin was, everyone who bought a Tesla had a perfectly good Lexus in their garage. They weren't in the market for a new car. They were in the market for a new story. And it's a very, very powerful lesson, I think, in terms of what you're doing. And so for us, that was really kind of the click that came together, which is, Dartmouth is this exceptional institution. I mentioned earlier, people go there to change the world, but we really, the existing site wasn't capturing that storytelling piece. And you can have a great content strategy and a great navigation and all those key pieces, but it all needed to bubble up into some really, really compelling storytelling. And so for us, that was that insight into the strategy process, and sort of led to the North Star that we worked backwards from in the process. So I'm playing a short video here, just showing the site and what the new design was. You can certainly go to the live site as well to check out the work, but it was really focusing both on that, balancing that qualitative and quantitative piece. So sort of the human story and the opportunities and the outcomes and what can happen with Dartmouth, as well as sort of the key tactical things that you need to communicate about a higher educational institution. Another quick example I wanted to call out in terms of the new site experience was the For You feature. And so this was something we built into the experience to address some of the data that I was talking about earlier and that we found in terms of very specific different kinds of personas going to the site to have certain outcomes and get certain bits of information. And so you can kind of see it on the right-hand side, but we built a quick nav that really was highly targeted towards specific personas and then got them into the places that they cared about. The personas of a higher educational institution, as we know, can vary, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But this For You was a great way to sort of balance the core navigation of the site and then put a lot of highly specific things by persona in the right place. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the broader considerations beyond the digital strategy process that went into the redesign effort for Dartmouth. First one was CMS. So the current site, or the site before we started working on it, was Drupal 7. We moved to the latest version of Drupal 9 for the Dartmouth site. Drupal was compelling for a number of reasons for the project. I'm highlighting 4 sort of core pillars, but for those of you who aren't familiar with Drupal, it's an open source content management framework. It has a huge community of individual and organizational contributors. So it's one of the largest open source communities in the world, and there are so many individuals and organizations that contribute time, money, effort on maintaining, enhancing that software. And it gives you the benefit that open source software does, which is you're getting free work from that whole community and that collective effort. And the biggest indicator of that free work are the over 10,000 free modules that are available to extend and customize for individual sites. So beyond that open source component, there were 4 things about Drupal that really resonated for Dartmouth's needs from a tech perspective. One is security, and open source, there's sort of a mixed conversation online about open source and security, but the reason why you can have highly secure open source systems, and I often argue more secure than closed source systems, is no one's mortgage is on the line about reporting an issue. And if it's in a closed sourced system, then there's a lot of organizational politics that can go into how to properly address a security issue. But in an open source world, everything is sort of known and focused on, and you have a really collaborative effort to let's get this addressed, let's get it reported quickly, and let's get a release out for it really fast, that's really why we find the security story of open source so compelling. In security, I'm never really worried about what I know. I'm worried about what I don't know. And you know a lot less when it's open. You know a lot more when it's open source because you can kind of see everything under the hood. Compliance, the second pillar, was really key. Website accessibility is probably something very aware to most of the folks on this call from higher education, but really, really key, both from a regulatory and litigious perspective, but also, even more importantly, an inclusivity component to compliance, making sure a site is accessible to all forms of users, regardless of how they might interact with the site. So that was key. Drupal has that really built into the core. The third pillar that was really important was future-proofing. The future is unknown, and it's hard to speculate about what's going to happen in the future. The pandemic certainly demonstrated that. But for us, the really great part of Drupal is that it's built API first. So in its internal architecture, it's built with an API first architecture, which means that in the future, it can be made headless really easily. So if in 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, headless is an important trend that Dartmouth or a Drupal, an organization leveraging Drupal need to take advantage of. Because of that API first architecture, it's all set and it's all ready for that transformation process. That was really, really important to make sure that the investment today was going to have dividends over the years. And then the last piece was making sure that marketing and communications, the teams that actually run the website, produce the content, interact with the community, enhance the website, support marketing campaigns, all of those folks needed a really flexible, modern editorial experience. And you can do that with Drupal, especially if you're leveraging some of Acquia's products that enhance that editorial experience, like a site studio. I touched on accessibility in terms of one of the value pillars of Drupal. Drilling into that just a little bit more, talked a little bit about this, but accessibility is key. It's also, though, important to remember that compliance is an ongoing effort. It's really, it's not an exercise where you launch and then you never address compliance again. It's really, from an organizational perspective, it's a monthly or generally quarterly exercise that an organization needs to do and invest in order to maintain compliance. That's because the website is live, things are changing, it's being enhanced, there's new content, there's new media, there's new plugins, there's new MarTech technologies. It's always an evolving beast, we know this, but that makes compliance with accessibility especially important to focus not on a one and done strategy, but making it part of that quarterly focus, that regularization, that operationalization of hygiene of your digital experience. I want to talk a little bit about some of the personas, and this was a key consideration for the project too. I mentioned earlier we had that For You feature. Higher ed has very different stakeholders. Justin Anderson talked about how everyone thought they were the most important user of the website, and that's probably the same with a lot of you all from some of the higher educational institutions where you are. Certainly, students have different needs than faculty and staff and media and alumni and donors and the community, and all of those folks have different considerations. But it's also important to focus on where those considerations align. And so when you're dealing with a situation where you have multiple persona groups like Dartmouth and most higher ed organizations do, the three kind of areas that tactics we use to sort of deal with that situation. So when I say Venn is your friend, that's that first element, which is really focus on where they're different to learn, but then also focus on where they overlap, right? A Venn diagram is the circles that have sort of overlaps on them. There are common things that persona groups will care about, and you can form really effective strategies from identifying where that overlap is. It turns out that staff and faculty and students and prospective students and the community and donors and really every single group really cares about how Dartmouth is making an impact in the world, right? And from that insight, from that overlap of those personas, you can tell a broader story and have a broader strategy. Secondly is really focus, really narrow the focus and try to execute on one thing per persona group really well. There are dozens of different ways to serve your different audience groups. What's the most impactful? What's going to get you the best return? And just execute really well on one per each of those groups, and you'll get a lot of value out of it out of the gate for a good return on the time. And the third piece is look at personalization. So there are always opportunities to speak to different audiences with a little bit of a different content, CTA, copy tweaks, navigation tweaks. Look for opportunities there to personalize, because that can trigger better engagement metrics across disparate and diverse prospect groups. Shifting gears just a little bit to content strategy, so, some of the ways that we think about dealing with content. Dartmouth has a big story to tell. It has 250 years of history, like Justin talked about. It's a big, broad story to lots of different folks. When we're thinking about content strategy, we tend to focus, think about these three areas. One, work backwards, right? Always start with the goal in mind. Always start with the end in mind. That's some of the best advice I ever got professionally. Where do you want to end up? Work backwards from there. And when you start with the end in mind and what you want that to look like, or the metric you want, or the engagement, or whatever that is, then it becomes much easier to have a conversation about tactics, strategies, the approach, where we're going to invest our time, because you're working backwards from what that goal is. That's key. Two, this is tricky and it's kind of a dark art and a little bit of hand wavy, but you've really got to start with the heart and end with the head. So there's data, there's analytics, you've got to focus on that, but you also have to go with some instinct and some intuition and really lean on people that have a good feel for what content is impactful. It's really a mix of both. Just practice it, reflect on it, and get better, but really make sure you balance both of those pieces. And then three, I'm going to go to the next slide in terms of finding the right balance. And I think this is where a lot of organizations can get tripped up. And so there's this spectrum, there's demand and there's brand, and every website of everyone on this webinar is on this spectrum. You might not know where you are on the spectrum, or you might be in the wrong place that you need to be on the spectrum, but you're on the spectrum. And it's about the decisions you make and the compromises you make in terms of where to focus your energy and what's in the navigation and what makes up that whole digital experience. There isn't a right place on this band other than probably too extreme left or too extreme right. And there's no right place for an organization. I can't say you want to be in the middle or right of middle or left of middle, but you need to be conscious of where you want to be and where you are today on here. Because if those two are different, that's going to inform any redesign effort. And if you don't have a really clear grasp of where you are and where you want to end up on this band between telling a brand story and generating value the way you measure value and success, it's going to compromise a lot of the strategies that you then invest a lot of effort in and try to get value out of. All right, so I want to share a couple of metrics. Justin shared some about the site before. Since the new site has gone live, really great engagement metrics and some of the ways that Dartmouth was measuring success. More than a doubling of increase in average time on page, which is great. That indicates that people are engaging with content and finding it compelling. Increases in session duration and great recognition from industry peers. So all the things we want to see in terms of engaging folks on the website more, all improving very quickly after the site went live. And lastly, in terms of some learnings from this process, there's always a lot to learn in an effort. You always want to make sure that you're learning every time. And if you haven't learned in the last 6 months, you're either in the wrong job or on the wrong project or thinking about things wrong or things are a little trickier than you want, but you always want to make sure that you're constantly learning and every project should offer those. Always important to get feedback after launch and really parse and deal with feedback internal to the organization, external feedback, and understand the different perspectives of people inside the organization and outside, sort of how you balance that feedback. Monitor analytics closely, probably more closely at the beginning of the effort of the period after launch, so that you can quickly iterate and learn and make changes to the site that will have good long-term impact. And then be ready to make changes. It's okay, right? The site's going to go live. You're going to get feedback. A whole bunch of people that said they looked at the designs didn't really. They're going to look at the site when it's live, and then you're going to find out stuff. So be ready to make some quick changes and enhancements, and that's fine. Your velocity is going to be higher 3 months for the 3 months since launch to tweak the site once it's live, and that's a good thing, and you're going to end up in a good place. All right, I'm going to hand it off now to Lynn. Thanks, everyone.
So Justin, there's a couple of questions that came in. We're going to do a poll question just a second, but there are a couple of questions that came in. I thought we could also, maybe you could answer. So one was, did you give any consideration, did you and Justin give any consideration to, part of the personas may be either parents or prospective students that have low internet connection, have a slow internet connection. So was that any kind of consideration as you were thinking about what does your architecture look like, or how do you design the pages, or was that consideration at all? I'll look to who wants to answer it. Justin E.
Yeah, I can start, and then Justin Anderson, you can add if you'd like to. I think performance as a baseline, the front end load time is crucial for SEO, for people in low latency environments. So that really underpins a lot of concerns. The Dartmouth audience generally comes from areas that have good internet connections. I think if the audience group was pretty heavily in terms of either developing countries or areas of the that don't have higher bandwidth, I think that would be more of a concern and a priority. So yeah, baseline, you want to optimize performance to make sure the site indexes well. But I think that's more driven by looking at the analytics data and understanding if they're coming from areas where bandwidth might be a challenge. And Justin Anderson, I don't think that was generally a big concern for the Dartmouth applicant pool.
Well, we did generally. You're absolutely right, but we did spend time thinking about the video, and which is so the video is on the homepage, which was a big change for us. We went from something that was completely static to sort of this big, beautiful video montage, and so we did want to make sure that we were not crashing. The site was not crashing for, what we presume could be applicants in, India or China, or pick the spot that you think you would want to be recruiting from that may not uniformly have great internet. Not to mention places in this country, in many counties where I live in Vermont, it would probably, we were aware that it could crash. So certainly something that we thought about, and particularly because of the choice we made to lean into video.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it brings up a really good engineering paradigm, which is making systems that fail well, right? Because there's always unseen consequences. So you want to make sure you can degrade. So yeah, thanks.
Great. We had another question come in. I'd like to, and be good to kind of, I think, talk about this one. So someone asked a question about when you were initially, Justin, we're thinking about what technology to use and what platform. Obviously, you chose the Drupal platform. Was there a consideration around WordPress? And why, if you did that comparison, why did you end up choosing Drupal over WordPress if you did indeed do that comparison?
Yeah, I think for us, there's two areas that shine, especially that one was security, which I talked about. With open source software, community is destiny. And the Drupal community is largely, the open source community is largely developers, and developers are highly focused on security. And so you see the internal architecture, the API structure really pretty mature across most of the CMS platforms in terms of the best practices that are followed in the industry standards in terms of locking it down. It is very high on that metric. It leads to the second one too, the comparison, which is when you want to extend beyond just the core marketing experience, that internal architecture sophistication that gives Drupal a very high level of security also gives you a suite of APIs that are really good to build and leverage on and extend. So when an organization, even at launch, might not be extending beyond the sort of public-facing website, but when there's a potential roadmap in the future, and I talked a little bit about this with headless and API first, but when there's a potential roadmap for deeper integrations with other systems, or in Dartmouth's case, they're going to leverage this platform and push it out to other departments and schools and groups in the organization. That robust internal architecture just really helps from an extensibility perspective, and that tends to really stand out against WordPress as well.
Okay, excellent. We have some other questions that have come in, but let's go on. I promise we'll come back to the other questions. Let's go on a little bit. I have a couple of poll questions for us to cover, and then we'll also have other time a little bit further along to do some other general Q&A. So here's a question for you. As you for all attendees, how crucial is your digital home to attracting a strong cohort of students each year? So how important is your digital presence, do you think, on attracting your new students? You think it's very crucial, not crucial, or sadly, nobody comes to your site? I'm hoping not many people answer that bottom one. So let's see, you can take a minute to answer that, and we'll see the results come through. Okay, I love this. All right, very crucial, 91%. Not as crucial, 9%, I get that. And luckily we had 0 and then no one comes to my site, because that would be sad. So very crucial, 91%, obviously very high. I'm not at all surprised by that. I hear that all the time in terms of how crucial the website is in terms of driving communication to students and for parents. And I will say that as a mom of 2 college students, I will say that we were very actively involved in looking at all the prospective college sites for my boys. So it was as a parent helping to make the decision or helping my boys to make their decisions. It was crucial for us as well. So thank you for that, for joining the results on the poll. Let's move on to talk a little bit about how important potentially is it to integrate a digital asset management product across your stack to help maximize that ROI. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. I'll talk a little bit about Dartmouth, and then, Justin, you can, feel free to chime in here at any point in time to kind of talk about how you folks did with your DM. One of the things that I hear a lot, and I've experienced myself as a marketer, as a CMO, I run my own website, of course. I always recommend that it's really valuable to think about installing a digital asset management product first. So if you're going to look at like replatforming and redoing, changing up your website, a lot of times I think it's great advice to have that installed first and to make that be kind of the first part. As Justin was working through all of his investigative work and so forth, I think doing a little legwork up front and getting that DM installed can be very, very helpful in the long term. So Dartmouth has used a DM to organize photographer photos for other internal department use, and for some limited, I'm understanding, limited external media access as well. So during the redesign for Dartmouth, they created open public portals for the media that included high resolution seasonal photos by season and photos of their leadership team. And obviously by using a digital asset management product, this is something that they can continuously reference. They also allowed students and families to download their class photos via the DM. And the class photos are always the most popular. Again, as a parent, I would agree with that. The visual identity portal in the DM contains Dartmouth's the style guidelines, the typefaces, the word marks, and other brand marks for users that are obviously very, very specific for Dartmouth, and allows them to download those and to be able to have the most up-to-date visual identity. No matter what department that you're in within Dartmouth, you'll be able to access those. So internally, they use the DM extensively for the website redesign. It allowed them to replace images regularly and keep the site current and very fresh. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about DM, but first we're going to go to another poll question. So get your hands to the keyboard. We did some recent surveys over the past 12 months, asking marketers, asking educators, what are the most newest technologies that you're looking at going forward? So just a question, do you think? So what % of marketers do you think will be adopting a DM in 2022? This is what they told us through this survey that we recently ran. So of all marketers out there, cross industries, do you think it was 20%? Do you think it was 45? Or do you think it was 60%? I'll give you a minute to answer that. Let's see. So 20% of you said 13, 45% said, I'm sorry, 48% said 45%, 38% said 60%. According to our survey, the correct answer was the 45%. So the majority of you got that. So interesting though, because it's definitely something that's, in the past couple of years has come up as new technology for all marketers and branders, no matter what industry, right? So the more you can kind of keep track and keep your images and keep that up to date and have a central pool for people to use, the better, because it's going to be much faster in terms of getting any kind of communication done or website page done or communication that you're sending out, to your students or prospective students and parents. Okay, a little bit about kind of the building blocks of the content-driven experiences with DM. So, the right DM, I always like to say, can set your content creators up for success and help everyone in every communication channel align to your brand story. So the DM powers the building blocks of content to get the right customer-driven experiences. And for those people who do it right, the DM serves as a foundational component to a really great intelligent content strategy, because structurally rich content comes with great metadata, and automatically discoverable content comes with good governance, and adaptable content comes with web enablement and repurposing for the central source of truth. So I won't go through all of this, but I will just say that can you back up one more? Thank you. The benefits really include as you can see here, it's kind of some of the keys to building your brand from the core. When you manage things like your core brand assets, your messaging, your typography, your colors, all of your identity assets, all of them kind of work together to really help to build your brand. And so the benefits of having the DM include improving your brand consistency with controlled access to current assets. So ideally, no longer are people using, the pictures from 3 years ago or the logo from 10 years ago. And you're really providing consistent access of high quality brand materials to everyone on the campus. And you're helping your people help themselves in terms of sharing the great brand story. And you can help by having those brand guidelines. And it's a great way to be able to distribute those brand guidelines as well. So next slide. So you can see that kind of integrating a DM with other key solutions also leads to, by integrating your DM, for instance, with your site, it leads to more control over your brand consistency, more productivity from your teams, less waste of time, less waste of searching time, more security, extensibility, and accessibility, and more trackable data and a more agile overall organization. Thank you. I like this one, little pun in cheek. Why give a DM? The digital asset management provides a lot of advantages, as I've been talking about, but basically it gives you easier access. So easier access for colleagues, agencies, business partners, contractors that you may be working with all around the world that have the most current digital brand assets that you can access. Streamline workflows. So you have built-in workflow tools for creating, approving, publishing, and connecting to make it much easier to collaborate on the production of new digital assets. And at the end of the day, you'll also have meaningful analytics. So analytics on the data to be able to measure performance and the usage of digital assets for straightforward evaluation. You'll be able to tell what's working, what's resonating, and what's not. Just a couple of other examples. I love the Dartmouth example of what they've done. They've just really done a great job. In case you're curious about a couple of other schools, that have also used the Acquia products and also the digital asset management products. Two of which are, one is Albany Law School. So they had, they really, I think, they've done a great job as well. So they have had kind of like, as I talk about kind of the before and after picture, they had a previous, what I'll call a legacy site, and what they call a legacy site, built years ago on SharePoint. It was quite antiquated, had an outdated design. It really just wasn't meeting their current needs. And they had a difficulty in terms of managing a staff to try and keep up with it. So by using Acquia products, they streamline their design. They have a support of multiple content creators now. So multiple content creators can go in, they could create pages, they could create sites. They can still meet the brand guidelines. They can still set with the parameters within the box that they need to stay in terms of brand and staying on brand, but multiple people are able to edit that content very quickly. They have new accessibility designs. You can see what they made sure that they adhere to in their new site. And they had everything from page load time decreasing, site traffic increasing. They just had some great results as well. And they're still super happy with it today. The next school to talk about is Portland State University. Again, their before need was they needed to unify. They had 340 multi-site platform, 340 sites with more than 40,000 pages and full syndication down to 216 multi-sites. So what they were trying to do was to make sure that they had a platform so all the different schools, all the different departments within the school could comply to brand guidelines. They could look similar, but they each had their own look and feel. They each had their own content that they wanted to create. So they were able to, by using a communications team and 2 or 3 members of the team, no developer, they were able to build the sites, build content, roll out these sites, and have nice consistency across the board. And they were able to do that quickly and easily. So another great example. All of these examples are on acquia.com. If you ever want to take a look and come read more about them, just go through the education case studies. And there's a lot of different detail there around the success that the schools have had. So let's go into talking a little bit about more Q&A. A couple of things for, we'll handle some of the questions that are left, but a couple of things. If you're interested in learning more, Acquia and Third and Grove have a DAM evaluation toolkit, your path to the right DAM solution. So that's a guide that's accessible to you, and you can get that through acquia.com. And we can put in the link. Why don't we put the link? If someone could help me put the link in the chat to this, that would be great, so that everyone has it. And let's take a look at some of the other questions that came in since we have a few minutes left to go. Someone asked a question earlier, Justin Anderson, about how many content, is a Drupal related question, about how many content types did you use within Dartmouth? Do you know for Drupal?
I don't know. Justin E., do you know?
I want to say
actually, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
I may have that. 11.
Okay, excellent. All right, I'm looking through the other questions I can. Someone else had a question on persona. Like the persona approach you cited, for example, for your students, as part of the redesign process, can you touch on what you did to assess user experience? Did you get feedback from these specific groups as you were going through the design process?
Yeah, so we did. We did a number of different things. We actually did some surveying in the alumni body to see the kinds of information and the kinds of resources that they would want on their For You page. And so we really wanted to program that and curate that page to be in line with what the demand was. And so the surveying helped us come up with that. At least it helped us to launch that site and to have things on there that we thought would be most of use. Likewise, we also went to the library and just approached students a number of different times just to sort of get their feedback on user experience, what they thought worked, what didn't work. Again, going back to the video, a big question we had was, does the video work? Are the cuts too quick? Should they be quicker? Should there be more images? Should there be less? So yeah, we absolutely did, and we did it in multiple ways to try to just sort of get to as many different people in as many different ways as we could. And of course, it's a work in progress, as Justin E. mentioned. That's the great thing about digital, is that you can continue to make changes. It's not like going to print, where once you're done, you're kind of done. So it's an iteration that continues to this day.
Awesome. Tom is asking about, obviously attracting new students is critical. How about the focus on attracting alumni and or donors? Did you focus on those personas at all?
Well, yes, certainly for alumni. As I said, we did survey work with them. Beyond that, I was in touch regularly with alumni relations to get their sense of what they know that their constituents wants. In terms of donors, I mean, this is sort of I don't know that it's exactly responsive to your question, but I think on the home site, we have the most links to giving and to the campaign and to our philanthropic efforts. We have more links to philanthropy than to probably any other resource. And that is to say, we have it like it's in the nav. We have it. We have call to actions in the drop down. It's in the footer. So we tried to make sure that was really frequently appearing on the home page once you land there and as you scroll down, and that certainly had donors in mind.
Okay, awesome. Justin, talk to us about the size of your team. How many people on your web team?
Yeah, so the web services team is about 8. So probably now with that 10 people. It's probably about 10 people. And obviously, that's at least one of the reasons we work with Third and Grove, because we weren't going to do this completely in-house, not with a team of 10 that has to service, the entire institution.
Okay. Are there any other? I'm just trying to looking through the chat here. Justin E., did you see any other questions that had come in that I didn't ask?
I don't think so.
I see. How long did it take to rebuild the site?
Good question.
Yeah. So Justin, from start to finish, how many months was that? I mean, we started in the fall and launched in the summer. Is that right?
I think it was about 9 to 10 months. That sounds right. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, time for one last question, if there is one. I will say that, Justin, I couldn't agree with you more, Justin E., about using data as you look at gathering data to make your decisions around everything from navigation to content, and how important that is. Like in the many site redesigns I've gone through, that's like always coming back to using that data is critical, right? Mm. And it does stop the popularity contest or the voting or the, I like the blue over the red because it's my favorite color. And so I think that definitely helps a lot. So
Yeah, data is key. Absolutely. And to go back to Justin Anderson's question, someone had asked about the project team. Dartmouth also has a great internal web development team, but the Dartmouth digital ecosystem is hundreds of websites. And so there was a close collaboration with us and the internal team to make sure that they understood and were participating in that development process. And then they'd be able to take that and sort of leverage it out to the broader ecosystem. So if there are higher ed institutions on the call that have internal teams, there are ways to really successfully engage like an external agency with your own internal experts. And if it works well, then everyone learns from each other, and that's really good. You can embed the developers into the agency team. They can sort of work with some folks outside their organization, bring some ideas back, and they're also then bought into what's developed. So it's not just this thing dropped on the web services team like, well, now this is your problem. They participated in building that solution and then have that context, and that can set up when a project is a 9-month project is really just a phase 1, and there's a phase 2 where it starts to expand over a complex ecosystem.
Right. Okay. So let's close off by talking about how do people get more information. So if you, as I said earlier, if you're interested in more information about the Acquia Dam, you can read our the Acquia and Third and Grove evaluation kit, and that's going to be, we'll send you out an email. Everyone that's on here today will get an email with a link, so you can just click their link if you want, or forward it to your teams. If anyone wants to know more information about working with Third and Grove, Justin, what should they do?
Please just reach out. My email's right there on the screen.
Excellent. And Justin Anderson, let me just say, first of all, congratulations. Congratulations for an excellent project. Congratulations for continuing to forward your brand, a beautiful, wonderful brand that you just has such a great reputation. So congratulations for keeping that up and for doing such a great job and for your site rollout. So big congratulations. If anyone wants to learn more about Dartmouth, are you open for any questions, Justin, or them contacting you or a member of your team?
Of course. My email, like Justin's, is on the screen right now.
Excellent.
Please reach out.
Excellent. Well, thank you, panelists. Thanks to all of you who joined. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all your questions in the live chat. It's nice to be able to stay interactive. And my thanks to the EDUCAUSE team. And I'm going to turn it back to the team.
Great, thank you so much. Now, folks, if you selected opt out during your registration, you won't receive an email. So if you're interested in receiving that resource, please reach out to Lynn, Justin E, or Justin A. Also, if your question wasn't answered, their emails are there, so please reach out to them to get those last-minute questions answered. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us.